How many of you been to the UU Church in Gloucester? Gloucester, you know, that little section up northern Massachusetts? Nobody? Nobody? Okay. Did you know that, whether or not you've been there, was the first Universalist church in the entire country? Did you know that was the church where John Murray came from England, gave his sermons, and spread Universalism across the entire country? Did you know that was the first church to have a do not trespass sign on the lawn? It's true. The thing is, they were so proud of their Universalist heritage that in 1961 they didn't want to quite merge. So the result of that was that they slowly lost members. They went from over 200 to less than 15. So the church started to decay, and some folks from town started taking things. So they had a no trespassing sign. Now that's not very welcoming, which is what I want to talk to you about. The great thing about being able to come here is that I get to talk to you about things I'm passionate about, and you have to listen to me. And I'm passionate about something called radical welcoming. Now, at UU churches throughout the country, the welcoming congregation has referred to mean churches who have been certified to be open to all persons of all gender identities. You know that. That program began with a General Assembly vote in 1989, and soon after, a process of certification was developed. This process was focused on education about LGBTQ communities, discussion throughout the congregation, and community outreach. Since its inception, the program has been very successful and has spread throughout the country. I am proud to be part of this community, which is a welcoming community. I believe it is a point of great honor for us. For far too long, gender-fluid people have suffered in American society for no reason other than for being themselves. Sometimes the worst indignities have come from those who claim the focus of their religion is love, while they actively exclude people who may not conform to their ideals of correctness. UU churches have made a step in the right direction by affirming that all expressions of gender are welcome. But LGBTQ people are not the only ones being rejected and dismissed by religious communities. People of color, people who are dealing with serious economic challenges, people of different religions, people of no religion, people whose rights are being denied, and people of different cultures are just a few examples of the groups who are being shunned by some traditional religions in this country, and sometimes even by our own tradition. What we need is not just a welcoming tradition in our congregations, we need radical welcoming. In 2020, the UUA Commission on Institutional Change issued a report entitled Widening the Circle of Concern. Its goal was to support long-term cultural and institutional change that redeems the essential promise and ideals of Unitarian Universalism. In 2021, the General Assembly approved a statement of conscience which, among other things, called upon UU congregations to, quote, build relationships across boundaries of privilege and oppression. Now, in 2022, we stand on the threshold of a new world. The pandemic has proven to us that we are all connected. Something that happens in some small, distant village can affect the entire world. Ecological disaster affects every single being on this planet. A war in Eastern Europe threatens to cause economic suffering, environmental disaster, and starvation in countries across the globe. At no time have we come to understand how intricately our lives are bound together. And yet, we continue to fight amongst ourselves. We continue to draw lines and foster divisions. And we continue to isolate ourselves. Radical welcoming is one small way we can resist those tendencies. At this point, you might ask, well, what's the difference between welcoming and radical welcoming? But before I answer that, let me tell you why I became fascinated with this topic. Shortly, as the pandemic was starting to wane, if it ever does actually wane, I was asked to give sermons throughout New England. I was lucky enough to be invited to speak at quite a few UU churches. At first, my sermons were given over Zoom, where I had little chance to see the church, but soon churches started opening up, and I was invited to go to the sites, sometimes to give a sermon to an empty room and a camera. At one of the first UU churches I stepped inside, there was an inscription that said something to the effect of, "Here you can avoid the fires of hell." I don't know about you, but I was not feeling warm and fuzzy. It was a strange thing to see inside a UU church. It's not really the kind of message we want to convey, but the church was historical, and the members wanted to keep some of its ancient artifacts in place. What struck me, though, was how it made me feel as a visitor to the church. Historical artifact or not, it didn't make me feel welcome. As I started speaking live at other churches, I began to think about what would it be like to visit each of these churches as a newcomer. What if I knew nothing about Unitarian Universalism? Would I come to understand it when I walked through the doors, when I met the people inside? What if I was someone looking for a church after being turned away from another denomination? Would I feel welcome, accepted, or would I be invisible? What if I was a UU and had just moved here? Would I be able to find my way around the church? Would I be ignored if I looked different, talked different, believed different things than those around me? Would I want to become an active member of this church? I began a process of informal research where I simply walked through the churches and sought answers to these questions. What I found was that every church I visited proclaimed they welcomed everyone, and I believe they all meant it. UU churches are well-intentioned. We have our hearts in the right place. But sometimes the things we do give off a different message. Let me give you a couple examples. So, one church had a beautiful and well-designed welcome center. So this is the place with your name tags and Sorry, that's the other one. This is the place with information about where to sign up and where everything's going, and you can get your guest name tag. It's a welcome center. It was beautiful. Big, lots of information, pamphlets, all that sort of thing. The only thing is, it was in a hallway that no one ever went to. So if you came in the front door, where most people came in, you would never go there unless someone took you there. Here's another example. Visitors were encouraged at another church to join the members afterwards for coffee hour. They never said where it was. At that time, it was outside. So even if you went through the door you came in, you would never see it. Someone would have to show you. So I said, why not add coffee hour, which is outside through these doors? Very simple change, but it's much more welcoming. After several more of these experiences, I began to turn my informal research into a more formal pursuit and discovered the concept of radical welcoming. The idea of reaching out to others to widen our circle of concern and compassion fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more. The term radical welcoming was coined by Episcopal priest Stephanie Spellers in her book, Radical Welcoming, Embracing God, the Other, and the Spirit of Transformation. She points out that a lot of liberal churches are welcoming, yet are still struggling to become multicultural or multiracial. For her, the difference between welcoming and radical welcoming has to do with intention and commitment. Bringing different people into a shared community involves overcoming fear and accepting change. Both are challenging things for anyone. Radical welcoming involves a process of constant growth and metamorphosis within the congregation. It's the difference between, say, knitting and quilting. So knitting takes strands and puts them together into one design. But quilting takes separate things that are already fully designed and stitches them together. The design of the quilt is allowed to take shape through the addition of each new and unique pattern. The individual pieces make their own contribution to the whole, and yet are held together by a few consistent threads of solidarity. Another way to look at this is that welcoming is about telling others about us, while radical welcoming is about listening to others and inviting their stories to become part of our own. It's about listening to the hopes and dreams of others. It's about asking people what it is they seek and what is it that fulfills them. It's the difference between transmission and transformation. Why did I become obsessed with radical welcoming? Because I believe our Unitarian Universalist message of hope and inclusion desperately needs to be heard and shared by people, all people. No one has to commit to our way of thinking, but they should at least know that it exists, that there is a compassionate alternative to the messages of hate and division currently being spread in the world. We are like a pearl in an oyster. Think about it. The ocean floor is made up of all kinds of sediment and tiny creatures from all over the world. Whenever a small bit of this material enters an oyster, the oyster covers it in a special substance. Eventually, a beautiful, luminescent pearl is created. We are like that pearl, in that we are all different in some way, and then we come together and form a brilliant pearl. But we hide that pearl within the shell. We are so annoyed at the coercive and sometimes aggressive tactics employed by some religious traditions to convert people that we resort to silence and avoidance about our own worldview. But I firmly believe, and I know you've heard me say this before, that we have a message of acceptance and hope that the world desperately needs. I am passionate about radical welcoming because I want those who seek a refuge from hate and oppression and dominance to know who we are and to be able to find us. I am passionate about radical welcoming because I want us to continue to grow and to actually transform into that multicultural, multiracial, multi-spiritual, multi-gendered, multi-generational, and multi-beautiful, beloved community we always talk about. I want us to be part of the radically welcoming world we dream of becoming. In the name of that which you hold in your heart to be sacred, may it be so.